So how much growth is too much growth when it comes to a small business like our screen printing and embroidery shop? How big is too big? You know, in the beginning, it always seems like, at least I did, want to keep growing and growing as fast and as big as you can. You know, I had the dream of a sea of automatic presses and a huge warehouse, you know. But I think that starts to change after a while, and you realize, for me, I realized that there's sort of a sweet spot, you know. There's definitely a sweet spot as far as size, revenue, and the amount of output you have to do. And as we grew, it was exciting, it was fun, you know. And I was like, we got to keep growing, let's keep growing, let's keep growing. And, you know, usually generally in business is you either focus on profit or you focus on growth. It's hard to really do both. And for a while we were doing both. So I was like, let's just keep growing, let's just keep growing. And it got to a point where it was too much, you know. It started to get less profitable. It started to become super stressful, take time away from the kids and my family. And, you know, as you grow, you need more space, you need more equipment, you need more employees, you start using more supplies, using more electricity and energy, and, you know, a lot of these other costs that you don't really see. And your profit margin, at least for us, for our print shop, started to shrink quite a bit. So it gets to this point where you're grinding, and you're not making the money you once were, but you're doing way more work. And for me, after a while, that got really frustrating. And, you know, I understand you could push past that, keep growing your team and become more efficient. But for me, I think I realized what it was going to take to do that, and realized that's not what I wanted. You know, as we grew screen printing embroidery, it became less and less about the craft and our relationship with each customer and the depth of that relationship, you know, and the time and focus and energy we could put into designs for each job and making sure the print is perfect, which is what I love, you know. It became more and more about like a manufacturing environment. How fast can we do things? Customers want a fast turnaround. They didn't really care about the quality, to be honest. The select few did, but vast majority of our customers, small businesses and other businesses who need merch, it was like they didn't care. They wanted them fast, they wanted them cheap, which it's my fault, but isn't really a market that I wanted to be in. It's great for the money, usually, but that's what happens when you start to grow and grow and grow, is you have all these expenses to cover and bills to pay. So you have to start taking as much work as you can. You can't be as selective, because you have to pay those bills and cover that overhead. And for me, it sort of handcuffed me, especially creatively. You know, I had to constantly focus on volume and how much work we could do and how fast we could do it, which meant I'd put my own personal projects and creative projects to the side. I couldn't take on design projects like I wanted to. So I definitely think for a lot of businesses, especially small ones, and for me, my personal preference, there's definitely a sweet spot. Too big can be too big, and then too small, obviously you got to be able to support yourself and pay your bills. So there's a sweet spot where, and we had that for a while, where we had a perfect customer base. We loved most of our customers, and they were profitable customers, quote unquote profitable customers. The workload was very manageable, and the profit margins were big. But as we continued to grow, expanded, we got more units and storefronts, more equipment, added employees, you start to see that profit margin shrink, and that can become frustrating, especially when you're grinding and sacrificing all your time, sacrificing time with your kids, sacrificing time on your creative projects, your passion projects that really fire you up. You know, when you're a creative person, screen printing, embroidery, that's why we got into it. I got into it to design and print apparel, because that's what I like, that's what I love. And it got less and less about that and more about the numbers, turning a profit. How are we going to make payroll? You know, how are we going to pay rent this month? And hoping that jobs come in, and taking on jobs that you normally wouldn't want to take. For instance, right before this downsize, decided to downsize because of these things. Right before this, it was getting sort of tight. You know, expenses were so high and revenue was sort of plateaued that we got this opportunity for a 6,000 piece job, front and back. So that's 12,000 impressions. Luckily, it was black on a light color, which goes super fast. So we priced it as competitively as we could to get the job, because we're like, all right, we need this extra income, you know, to help us catch up a little bit past couple months. So we took that job we normally probably would have passed on, and it just ended up being a headache, dude. It pushed our production back for all of our other customers. They were frustrated, we were frustrated, everybody was frustrated. And, you know, I was making decisions I normally wouldn't make because we had overhead to cover, and I had to take this job because this is going to help. You know, I think when you're smaller and you limit your overhead, you kind of have more power. You can be more selective. You can only take the jobs you're fired up about, or from the customers you like, or the ideal profitable order. You don't have to take everything. You can have a smaller net when it comes to customer acquisition and job acquisition. So yeah, definitely, to wrap it up, for sure, there can be too big and there can be too much growth and too fast of growth. When we were growing as fast as we were, it was hard to keep up with the workload. You know, I had to train new employees. I had to train our current employees to get better. I had to get better. I had to figure out ways to become more efficient, figure out ways to cut costs, any processes we could eliminate to streamline it more. You know, you go into that mode of proficiency and efficiency, and that's not really me. You know, like I like it, and I have a little interest in that, but I'm the creative guy, man. I want to make cool stuff. I want people to get excited about the stuff we make, you know what I mean? It's more about that for me than the numbers and the efficiency game. But yeah, that's my view on it from about 7 years of running a screen printing and embroidery shop, growing from our garage where we had a manual press, a small dryer, you know, like the bare minimum to really screen print. From that to, you know, a 3 storefront unit, I think like, what, 2,500, 2,700 square feet, which isn't huge, but for us was pretty big. We added embroidery machines. Every little bit of profit we had extra, we put into equipment. We invested back into the business, embroidery machines, screen printing machines, other things, pieces of equipment to streamline. And that's the way it goes. You do what you can, and you learn, right? You learn. I learned that this rapid growth and huge isn't really what I wanted, or isn't what's ideal for us, my family, our business, and what I want to do. You know, I've realized I want the sweet spot of plenty of time with my kids and my wife, plenty of time for my creative projects, and plenty of time to put the time and effort into the jobs we do get from the customers we have. You know, we have a solid customer base now. I think downsizing and not having that huge overhead is really going to give us a better opportunity to do all those things. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. I'm going to be talking a lot more about this and ins and outs of the downsizing, you know, art projects I'm doing, screen printing projects I'm doing, design projects, whatever I'm doing at the time. It's going to really be centered around art, printing, a little bit of business, and just do it yourself, making stuff kind of stuff. So subscribe. I'll be making as many videos as I can. I got this new DJI. It makes it a lot easier to record. So I'll be recording, trying to hit that record button. Till the next one, I'll see y'all. Thank you for watching.